Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on the road ahead for the Progressive Tory Party. But first, a drive for independence.
We are now live gathering signatures to rescue Alberta from the clutches of people in Ottawa.
Jeffrey Rath was the first to sign the petition seeking a referendum on the question, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? And organizers now have until May 2nd to collect nearly 178,000 signatures. Joining us now is petition proponent Mitch Sylvester, CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mr. Sylvester, welcome to Alberta Primetime. Appreciate your time this evening.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. How mobilized are you to begin collecting signatures? What should Albertans expect of your canvassing campaign?
Canvassing campaign is going to be province-wide. What we're going to do is we're going to probably hit every community in the province, and we're mobilizing a large group of volunteers to actually accomplish that and get that done. We're getting our canvassers approved. We're asking for more canvassers. And, we've started collecting signatures already, as you saw in the clip on the introduction.
The Forever Canadian petition was fairly straightforward. Its message, stay in Canada. Your petition calls for considerable change. How prepared are those canvassers to answer the myriad of questions many Albertans will have about independence?
Well, I think they're very prepared. I think we're more prepared to take them to town halls and have a 2-hour discussion with them. And we have town halls all over the province running every night. So we're running 3 a day right now. So people will have the opportunity to have a real lengthy discussion and, listen to the facts as we present them and give them the opportunity to make up their mind on how they feel the future of Alberta should look.
What's funding your campaign?
So right now we're a grassroots organization. We have no major donors or no major people funding it. We're funding our campaign based on donations from the grassroots people. Elections Alberta tracks every penny. So we're going to understand that the funding is going to come from a specific place. It's going to be marked down, and we're going to have to account for every penny when we spend it. So right now we're starting at zero, and we're looking forward to raising enough money to take this to the end.
Okay. It's been reported that in the build-up to the campaign, your organization visited Washington, D.C. on 3 occasions, met with some level of U.S. government officials. How did this referendum drive factor into those discussions?
Well, everybody's talking. We're talking, based on the future, based on the fact that, I understand this. We're not government. We're just going there as individual citizens. They're curious who are leading this petition. They're curious to see how that's going to work, if it's going to affect them, how it's going to affect them, and potential conversations on what could happen moving forward. But that's all going to be for another day. They just want to understand the process. They basically didn't understand the process until we cleared it up. We explained it to them. And you know what? We're just making liaisons for something that could help the new Alberta government, if that becomes the case, move forward with our largest trading partner.
And did you ask for any level of support from U.S. authorities? Did they offer any level of support?
I don't think we're there yet. I think there's been conversation about that, but no, I don't think that's it's definitely not signed and sealed for sure. We've had discussions on a myriad of other things. Lots of things that the biggest thing that they're concerned about is border security. So that was something that we touched on. We touched on the fact we're talking about free trade. We're talking about all manner of stuff that we have no purview to do anything about, but maybe get some kind of idea on what their thoughts moving forward would be in case that we become a free and independent country and we're their northern border.
Okay, you have ties to the UCP, chair of the party's Bonnyville Cold Lake Constituency Association. Is that still the case?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So if it is that you're successful in collecting the required number of signatures, what are your expectations of the Smith government in moving this referendum process forward and taking Alberta to independence?
Well, you know what? I'm thinking that the government is giving us basically the opportunity to collect these signatures, same as they gave Mr. Lukaszuk. The Premier's stance on this is fairly clear. She's an independent Alberta within Canada person. We, however, feel that after the last federal election, that doesn't seem like Alberta's needs are going to be served by the federal government in Ottawa, and just very much the opposite. I think it's become very clear to us that not only do they not want us to prosper, they actually want to sabotage industry. So if that's the case, that the federal government wants to sabotage the biggest industry that we have in the country by far, how are we expected to pay back all the money that they keep borrowing?
Now, the narrative Mr. Lukazik, Thomas Lukazik, drove through his petition was that a referendum seeking actual separation would take a toll economically. How do you counter the concerns that maybe you risk driving away business, scaring off investment?
Well, I can't see that we could do any worse than Ottawa is doing right now. Mr. Carney's had $85 billion in investment leave the country since he's Prime Minister. I just don't think that, I think they're consciously trying to sabotage industry here. And I think that actually just the opposite. A free independent Alberta would create probably a boom.
What would a political landscape look like in an independent Alberta? What do you envision for governance?
Well, you know what? We have a discussion paper, draft constitution, done and prepared, and it's going to be released here this week. The idea is if we have a free and independent, if we win the referendum, within 2 months we'll have a constitutional conference, and the people will get to decide how they want their government to look. And based on the Constitution, that will be prepared then. And then at that point, you know what, we'll move forward to an actual election within a year. That's the plan. But, you know, I mean, the government that's in place is going to have to make that transition smooth and going to be in charge of making that happen, actually.
Should there be a provincial election before a referendum on your question is held so that Albertans know where their political representatives stand on this issue of independence?
Well, I think, yeah, well, I'm not in charge of that either, but you know what, I would prefer to get the referendum question done. And then after that, we'll see if Albertans actually have the will to take this another step.
Maybe one more question for you. The Forever Canadian petition took up a lot of oxygen. There are also no fewer than 26 petitions underway to recall Alberta MLAs. Are you worried at all Albertans might be getting petitioned out?
Well, we're surely not seeing it in our town halls. As a matter of fact, we've got people lining up across the street to get in. Every town hall, we've had 5 town halls since Tuesday night, and they've all been full to capacity or more. And people if we had more people there to collect signatures, we'd have collected probably everybody that came in the door. We just didn't have the capacity because we don't have enough canvassers approved to handle the volume. And that's a really good problem because we'll come back and have another event and a big one, and we'll actually make sure that we do have the volume.
Do you have a target number of petition signatures overall?
Well, I think it would be a disappointment to have less than what Mr. Lukazik had. I think that's a legitimate target. I think the ultimate target is to get everybody in Alberta to sign it.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time. Appreciate getting your perspective this evening, Mr. Sylvester. Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Mitch Sylvester is CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. From the launch of the petition seeking separation to recall petitions approaching deadlines and Peter Guthrie's new political identity. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Mark McQuaid-Boyd, a former MLA and cabinet minister, and John Santos is a political analyst. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the petition on separation. Now in a position to officially collect signatures and doing so, as we saw in the segment off the top of the program tonight with Mitch Sylvester, CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mark, as canvassers fan out across the province, town halls, rallies are held. To what degree do you see this initiative elevating debate over Alberta independence?
Well, it seems to have some legs, and I would hope that as people go out and gather signatures, they're able to answer some of the questions people are going to have, like what is this going to cost? what's, for example, we're going to have to, if we do this, we have to assume policing, education, health, border security, issuing passports and that. What's this going to cost? And do we have to assume a tenth of the debt from Canada? What are our sources of revenue going to be? There's lots of questions that I hope they can answer, because people need to go in eyes wide open into what they're going to be voting on.
John, there's already been Thomas Lukaszik's successful Forever Canadian petition, now this one on independence, and then there's the Alberta Next panel recommending multiple referendum questions as well. What's to be made of how crowded a space this is beginning to be?
If there is, in fact, some kind of an election to have a referendum over, some or all of these questions, it's going to be a very crowded ballot. And this is going to be very interesting from like an opinion formation standpoint. We know from public opinion research, market research, that people's choices don't exist in a vacuum. They're not, intransitive and fixed. They're context dependent. And one example is like people always wonder why retailers stock $500 toasters. I'm never going to buy a $500 toaster, but having a $500 toaster makes it easier to sell a $200 toaster when most people are looking to spend $100 or less on a toaster. And so having like a crowded ballot could potentially make some options which seem extreme on their own seem less extreme if more extremes are present on the same ballot. And so how this could apply to a possible referendum with many of these questions is, somebody who is not a separatist but still kind of pissed off with Ottawa, they might not be voting in favor of separation. Separation might not ever be on their radar. But if they're skeptical about some of the other policy recommendations or proposals that the government has floated, they might be more willing to vote yes in favor of something that they're skeptical about if it's placed alongside something that seems more extreme. So it sort of shifts the cost and palatability calculations that people have with respect to the options placed in front of them.
Mark, the Independence Group has until May 2nd to collect the necessary number of signatures. How do you see this potentially overlapping with the next sitting of the legislature and then the kind of political dynamic that might create for the Smith government?
Oh, I think it's going to be pretty interesting in question period for a while when they start up. And yeah, the timing's interesting. It might be a little difficult now to get signatures, but as the weather gets better, it's easier. And yeah, it's going to be interesting times. And I just hope that when people go to a referendum, should this happen, that they're well informed and not just voting emotionally, as John alluded to.
John, where do you see this leaving Thomas Lukaszik's Forever Canadian petition, which has already reached the successful mark? Does it just remain in apparent limbo?
Probably. I don't think this changes much. It was already approved. I don't know. I'm not constitutional expert. So I don't know what it would, what the implications are for having sort of two similar, two sort of flip sides of the same coin, options on the same ballot. But I think, as Mr. Sylvester said, they would like to get as many, if not more, signatures than Thomas Lukaszik's petition. And so that's going to feed into perceptions of which side has the momentum going into a possible referendum on one or both of these questions.
Okay, still on the petition front, there are accusations of harassment from the organizer of efforts to recall Highwood MLA R.J. Sigurdsson.
I'm a generally pretty positive person, so I like to see it as just like, yeah, these people are clearly unhappy, but we're still doing something. I'd like to keep going. I would not fault any of my volunteers if they feel unsafe and decide to stop. Like, that's totally fair. Molly Metcalf says volunteers have been harassed, received threats. She has received threatening emails. The people against the petition have taken pictures of private information and individuals, and that RCMP have been notified. She also says she only has about 500 signatures, but needs roughly 15,000. A petition to recall Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides, also short, about 10,000 signatures with only a couple weeks to go. John, what's to be made of the apparent toxicity around some of these petitions, the allegations of threats against organizers and volunteers canvassing for signatures?
It's par for the course these days. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality, and I think it's only going to get worse. The temperature and intensity of political discourse and debate is too high, and it's being contributed to and amplified just by the incentive structures that we have of our communications environments, whether it's commentators like myself in the mainstream media, right? But especially on online platforms and social media, where there's an incentive to have very polarizing, very charged content. It's called rage bait in those situations. So it's unfortunate, and I think it's only going to get worse, sadly.
Mark, the clock is ticking on many of these recall petitions, and it's being reported some still have a long way to go in collecting the required number of signatures. What does that say to you about the petition process and the actual role it has to play in a democratic environment?
Well, I think the thought maybe was noble, but I think the process is going to be difficult for people. And and then adding on this harassment, which honestly, that was happening in 2019 when I last ran. I had seniors coming back with signs, lawn signs, returning them to me because they were being harassed about having a sign. So as John said, this isn't new and it's not going away, but I think it's going to scare off a lot of people from signing, and they'll just let things go.
And one more quick one for you, John. Is there a point at which Albertans just get petitioned out?
Possibly. The thing is, the people who start these petitions, the people who volunteer for them, and the people who sign tend to be more engaged and more committed. And so the threshold that they have for the kind of stuff they're willing to tolerate is a lot higher. So while mainstream Albertans might become less likely to participate and pay attention to these kinds of things, I think the people who are doing them, engaging in them, signing them, some of them will fall off, but I think it will continue because they're committed.
All right, time for a bit of a break, but when we come back, the political identity Peter Guthrie will carry forward in rebranding the Alberta Party. More from our panel in a moment. Welcome back. The Alberta Party wound down 2025, ushering in a new name, the Progressive Tory Party of Alberta. Party leader Peter Guthrie made that announcement on social media 2 weeks after the Smith government passed legislation limiting provincial party names, making words like Conservative, Democratic, and Wild Rose off limits. Guthrie initially attempted to revive Progressive Conservative Party branding. Marg, as a former member of the legislature, do you see this new name carrying the weight or the sway of that targeted PC branding?
I'm not sure the name is as important as who the leader is and what people see that party standing for. I know I have a lot of Conservative friends who don't identify as UCP Conservatives, who, were part of the older party from before. And, that may be attractive to them, but I think they're going to look at Peter more than they're going to look at the name to decide if they join.
John, as a reference to conservative politics, how much of a fit is the term Tory, where the Alberta political dynamic is concerned? Is it one that will resonate with Alberta voters?
None of this makes sense to me. Like, I could spend an hour talking about this, which is probably 59 minutes longer than it really deserves to be talked about. Like, you have two guys who are joining this Progressive Tory Party who are not. I mean, like, if we think about what the word Tory means colloquially, right? Like, it's people who are fiscally conservative, but socially progressive, and sort of moderate conservatives. I don't think Peter Guthrie and Scott Sinclair are particularly known to be like moderate conservatives or centrists. Like, you have one guy who was, against COVID restrictions during the pandemic, and another guy who got booted out of caucus because he didn't think the budget was conservative enough. Like, that's not the portrait of two individuals I expected to sort of join, like that would break off from the left flank of the Conservative Party and try and resurrect the old Tory brand. And that's not even going into the historical, nuances that are part of the Tory brand that have sort of been lost in its colloquial understanding. So could this resonate? Maybe. But it just doesn't make sense on so many levels that I'm just having difficulty processing it, to be honest.
Well, Mark, how much value would there have been in keeping the Alberta Party identity? Is a name change necessary to move this party forward?
I think they would have been wise to have kept the name of the party and worked with it. But as I said before, I mean, you could call the party George. It's the leader, I think, that people are going to look at and see what they stand for. So, yeah, I'm like John, I'm a little curious as to why they needed to change the name. I think they might have been best to just wait there, but not sure why they wanted to. But I think we won't see some growth in there till maybe an election beyond this next one.
So, John, a name change has taken hold. What kind then of responsibility rests on Peter Guthrie's shoulders as leader, moving the Progressive Tory Party of Alberta forward toward an eventual election?
I think now the real work begins. And I mean, to be less glib, I think this is sort of the bigger practical problem with the name change is they have to communicate it, they have to explain what it means, and then they have to actually do the real work of fundraising, organizing, signing up members, getting candidates, all of that stuff. And the problem is they spent so much time, energy, and probably money on getting this, name change and trying to figure out a new catchy name that it probably took away from the time, energy, effort, resources that they could have put in to actually doing the work that wins elections, right? Like, I'm not saying that a name and branding and all that stuff isn't important, but sort of in the list of priorities that you need to do in order to be a competitive political force electorally, I don't think it is as high on the list as they have been making it. So, yeah, the real work for them begins in terms of organizing, signing up members, fundraising, all of the nuts and bolts stuff that actually wins elections.
Yeah, Mark, you've been through all of that. You've been on the campaign trail with a party that earned its way into government. So how challenging a task will it be to get the word out, line up prospective candidates, and to John's point there about fundraising?
Oh, super difficult. They've got to, like John said, the work starts now. And yeah, exactly. They're going to have to create a platform of what they stand for, go out and get members, get candidates, and fundraise. And that's all 2 people right now. So hopefully they can get some other friends and followers to help them out. But it's a big job, and it's going to take them a long time.
Yeah, and John, how interesting might this make the spring sitting of the legislature, or is it purely about lead up to the next provincial election, whenever that might be, whether that comes early or when it's initially targeted for?
Yeah, I think it's the latter of the points that you just made there. This isn't going to change the dynamic. Sinclair and Guthrie were already working closely together in the legislature, so them being part of this new political brand doesn't change anything from a House procedure perspective. So yeah, this is all about getting ready to have a competitive political party to contest the next provincial election.
Yeah, and I think a big one there will be finding candidates and locking in people on that front. All right, folks, we'll have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about BC Premier David Eby suggesting building a new oil refinery instead of a West Coast pipeline. Eric says you still need a pipeline to get the oil to the refinery. Hike writes, if I had to gamble on this, I would bet that there won't be a pipeline. Jay thinks, how about both? And increase oil by rail through Quebec. Liam says, finally, Canada needs a super refinery, not more bitumen pipelines. And Kelsey thinks this is ridiculous. BC is allowed to develop and export its resources, while Alberta is not. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, with signatures now being collected on a petition seeking separation, how might the drive for independence impact Alberta's investment climate? We'll hear from economist Moshe Lander on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.